Hello and welcome to the general prologue that Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English poetry, has written in his book, The Canterbury Tales. The mission of Chaucer is to speak dispassionately about the existing age. He just wants to delight in the creation of God. And this creation that existed in his age, in the state and in the church, interested him most. And to portray all this, he juggles up an occasion of being at the Tabard Inn, where 29 pilgrims enter. And we have seen the portraits of some of the glaring personages from this 14th century England. And he begins by describing the knight, then the squire, the yeoman, the nun with her inferior priestess, and the monk and the friar. And we continue further. A merchant was there with a forked beard, in motley, and high on horse he sat. So there was a merchant, and this merchant had a forked beard, a divided beard, in multicolored dress. Motley is multicolored, and high on a horse. Because he is a merchant, he should signify that he is a man in the upper strata of society. So he has a very high horse, and upon his head a Flandrish beaver hat. Flemish, Flandrish is Flemish. Beaver is the animal that lives partly on land and in water and is known for its very glossy skin. So he is wearing a hat made of the skin of beaver. His boots clasped fair and fettishly, and his boots were also tied properly. His reasons he spoke full solemnly, sounding always the increase of his winning. So whenever he talked to the people, he spoke very solemnly, very seriously did he talk to people, and he always spoke about, sounding is talked about, always the increase of his winning, the increasing profits that he was making. So every time that he spoke to the people, he would tell them that how much of money he was making. He would the sea were kept for anything between Middleburg and Orwell. So he would the sea, S-E-A. He wanted that the sea should be kept means protected. There should be a strict vigilance upon the sea, because all his merchandise came from the sea. So he wanted that there shouldn't be any theft, there shouldn't be any stealing on the sea. It should be kept properly guarded. Where? Between Middleburg and Orwell. So these were the places from which his merchandise came. Well could he in exchange shields sell. So he was very perfect in selling his wares. This worthy man full well his wit beset. There was no doubt that he was in debt. So this man is so witty. He is all the time speaking about his profits, and with his wits, there wist no wight, there was no doubt, wight is doubt, there was no doubt that he was in debt. He didn't betray anything, but somehow Chaucer must have probed deep into his persona and would have come to analyze that he was in debt somehow. Chaucer, because he is a person going deep. Otherwise, how would he make the portraits of these people standing apart from each other and forming a motley of the creation of God? So there was no doubt that he was in debt. So stately was he of his governance, with his bargains and with his chevisance. So stately, very he very proudly, and in a rich state was he of his governance. His um, keeping himself up was in such a state. Governance is holding someone in a good position. So the way he held himself with his bargains, all the time he spoke about the bargains and about the chevisance, the trade that he did. For certainly he was a worthy man withal, but sure to say, I know not how men him call. So he was a worthy man. Naturally, for a merchant, it's just appropriate that he doesn't sound, if at all he is going into debts or if he is slumping down, he shouldn't tell it in the world, because if he does, then there is every likelihood of his being destroyed in the world, which is so fraught with a competition. So he was a worthy man, and naturally, Chaucer's pilgrims are all worthy in their own respects. They are special. They are the best of their kind. So this merchant was also the best of his kind. He was properly kept, and all the time that he spoke only of the profits and never of the debt. This makes him appropriate to stand crystallized in the kaleidoscope that Chaucer has created. Now he comes back again to the church. A clerk there was of Oxford also, that unto logic had long ago. So there was a clerk. The clerks are students of theology. So he was a student doing his studies in religion, and he came from Oxford. That unto logic. And this man, this clerk of Oxford, was grounded in logic. Unto logic had long ago, very long back, he had assimilated logic, and all the health had gone out of him with the settlement of the logic inside him. Why? As lean was his horse as is a rake. How would Chaucer say that this man is very, very lean? Instead of saying, because he's a scholar, and a scholar should never be held to ridicule. So instead of holding the scholar to ridicule, he says that his horse, the horse on which he came, was as lean as a rake, like a stick. And he was not right fat, I undertake. And Chaucer says that I must commit that he was not right fat. He was not appropriately okay. But look hollow, and there too soberly. Full threadbare was his overrest coterie. So he looked hollow. The much of logic that went inside him deprived him of all flesh. He must have consumed it all to acquire the logic. So he looked hollow, but he looked very sober. His face betrayed his learning. Full threadbare, but learned he was, but the dress, the coterie, the small cloak that he was wearing was threadbare. Threadbare means worn out. The threads of the cloth material were visible, for he had got him yet no benefice. So he did not get for himself any benefice. Benefice is an office of profit. Nor was he worldly for to have office. And to make matters worse, he is not at all worldly. He is happy with what he has got. He searched, he hunted for wisdom, and that he has got in plentyfuls. So he was not at all worldly to go to people and ask for an office so that he could earn. So a man who deserves to go to Canterbury, he is not at all a worldly man. He is the man of logic. For him was lever have at his bed's head 20 books clad in black or red of Aristotle and his philosophy. So was never have he preferred to have it at his bed's head, at the bedside, 20 books clad in black or red, means bound in black or red color, because red and black were the colors in which books of value, books of great worth were bound. So instead of covering himself up, his cloak was threadbare, but his books were clad in black or red, and these books were of Aristotle and his philosophy. So when you when you claim to have mastered your degree of English, you will have to study Aristotle first in the 5th paper when you go to your MA final. So this study of Aristotle makes one appropriate to be taken as a scholar. And this man, he had 20 books of Aristotle and his philosophy instead of robes rich or fiddle or gay sautery. So instead of having rich clothes or a fiddle to play on and pass his time, or a sautery, he preferred to have books of Aristotle and his philosophy. But all be that he was a philosopher. So all his endeavors were that he becomes a philosopher. Yet had he but little golden coffer. So he was a philosopher of great degree, but he had very little gold in his coffer. Coffer is purse. But all that he might of his friends hent on books and on learning, he it spent. So all the money that he might from his friends hent is given by grace. So if there was any money given to him by the grace from his friends, that money he spent on books and on learning. He's a clerk, he's a scholar from Oxford, and he proves to be a worthy scholar. He spent all the money that his friends, when his friends saw him in misery, looking hollow and with a threadbare dress and completely lean, then whatever money that they out of charity gave to him, he preferred spending it on his studies, and busily gan for the soul's prayer of them that gave him wherewith to scholae. So busily, his other work apart from studies was to pray for the souls of those people, of him, of those that gave him the money with which to study. Of study to keep. Now these are very important lines. If you are to think of a scholar, this should be the description of one. What? Of study took he most care and most heed. So his only cares, his only attention was on books and study. Not a word spoke he more than was need. And he never spoke. Already he was hollow, and if he spoke his wisdom out, then he would be destroyed completely. So not a word spoke he more than was need. And the word that he spoke, that was said in form and reverence, and short and quick and full of high sentence. So if at all he spoke, it was in perfect form and in perfect reverence, and was short and quick and full of high sentence. Sounding in moral virtue was his speech, and gladly would he learn and gladly teach. This is the culmination. This is the highest point which a clerk should acquire in his life, that his speech was sounding in moral virtue. He spoke only of moral things, and his two occupations which interested him most were that gladly would he learn and gladly teach. Despite his hollowness, anything that tempted him ever to speak was whether to study or whether to teach. So this Clerk of Oxford is one character who is yet to enter into religion, but he has not entered for the simple reason that his own sole occupation and his sole delight is to be a scholar. Now the next character, a sergeant of law, aware and wise, that often had been at the Pervise. So there was a sergeant of law, a bar at law, someone who exercises law. He was aware and he was wise. Naturally, because he is in the prologue, he has to prove his worth. So he was perfectly deft in his trade and often had been at the Pervise. That means the highest court. There was also full rich of excellent, discreet he was, and of great reverence. So he was excellent and very discreet. Discreet is without any passion. He would just speak it out as he ought, and with great reverence. He seemed such. Now, having said that he is worthy, having said that he was excellent, having said that he was discreet and of great reverence, Chaucer puts that dash over there and says he seemed such. So there is a great difference in being and appearing. So whether he was really discreet is not known, but he seemed, he betrayed that artificial, that made up thing, that he was discreet. His words were so wise. So how did Chaucer come to assimilate that he was discreet? Because his words were very wise. But we all know that people at law are not what they seem to be. Justice he was full, often in exercise by patent and by plain commission. So he said that he was exercising justice everywhere by patent. By patent means by his own authority or by plain commission. So this is of the 14th century England. In those times, people used to have the cases decided by their alliances with the judges or with the other courts, with the other sergeants of law. So he had good friendship with everyone. So he used to get the justice done either by his understanding of law or by commission, for his science and for his high renown. So because he had the science, a systematic approach towards exercise of law, and he was a high renown, he was very well known, he was known to everyone. Of fees and robes had he many won. So great a purchaser was nowhere known. So he used to charge very high fees, and he had won them because he must have won several cases. Naturally, because when he knew the law and when he knew the other lawyers and the judges, definitely he would be winning the cases. And therefore, because he had so much of money, such a great purchaser was nowhere known. All was very simple to him in effect. His purchasing might not be in fact. So for him, everything was so simple that you could not question. In fact, is put to question. His purchasing might not be in fact. No one could question how was he able to have all that. Nowhere so busy a man as there he was, and yet he seemed busier than he was. So he was a busy man because he was exercising on law, but he also appeared busier than he actually was. Naturally, if you are not easily accessible to people, then your value rises up. So he had made it a point to appear busier than he actually was. In terms had he cast and dumsall, that from the time of King William were fall. So he knew by heart, in terms is by heart, he knew all the cases and judgments all, that from the time of King William were fall. There too he could indite and make a thing, there could no white pinching at his writing. So he could indite, he could quote by his rote memory and make a thing. When he was in the court, he would just utter the rightest thing, and there was no doubt at his writing. Whatever he wrote was taken for right and true. And every statute could he plain by rote. Rote is memory. So he had that, he knew every statute. He rode but homely in a medley coat. Again, he is in a medley coat, a multicolored coat, girt with a cint of silk with bars small. So his clothes were silk. They have to wear the black, and that was silk, which was skin friendly to him. All the time he wore that, and there were bars small. There were buttons, gold buttons. Of his array tell I no longer tell, and I don't want to tell anything more about his dress, because already I have talked about his worldly wisdom, his knowledge of the law, his exercise of the law, his winnings, his wisdom, and his knowing all the statutes, and no one being able to infect his earnings. These are some of the lesser known, of course not the Clerk of Oxford, who you must pay attention to, but the merchant and the sergeant of law have been put so as to give you a true representation of the 14th century England. He has taken people from all strata of life. Today we end here, and we shall continue. Thank you.